be your mediators today. My name is Mark. So with Thanksgiving right around the corner, let's talk about a presidential election that we're thankful for. In 1932, the presidential election featured Theodore Roosevelt running on a Democratic ticket against Republican Herbert Hoover. At this time, Americans were reeling from the effects of the 1929 stock market crash and were looking for a strong leader to guide the country out of economic depression. Today we have two commentators who will be weighing in on the 1932 election. Rachel will be representing the Democratic FDR, and Kevin will be the Republican Hoover. So Rachel, why was the 1932 presidential election so important?
Well, in 1932, FDR was a great president and a great nominee for the important election in 1932 because there are 13 million people unemployed. But if you look, by 1935, the nation had achieved recovery. And we can also tell by this that he was a great president because he had 4 terms. So people wanted to keep him in presidency.
Okay, well, Rachel, I don't think he was asking why FDR was such a great president, but the reason why the 1932 presidential election was so important was because
Really?
let me finish.
Okay.
Only 3 years later, or earlier, there was the Wall Street crash of 1929, and that plunged our nation into the Great Depression. So that's why it was so important, because we needed a strong leader to rise and pull us out of it.
But FDR was the strong leader.
Right, but that was the
okay. It's just.
Save it.
But so
okay,
you
okay,
said
okay,
that.
okay.
So you're saying that FDR was the strong leader.
No, I never said
You
that. I never said that. I
okay.
said we needed a strong leader, and that's why it was important, because we were determining who would be our strong leader.
Okay.
Alright.
We got that on tape, so we can go back.
So move on.
Yeah.
So, who do you believe to be the more qualified presidents?
Hoover.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, well, I'd say Hoover was definitely the most qualified president. One, because he was the incumbent. He had a lot of experience. For example, he was the head of the U.S. Food Administration during World War I, and he was the State Secretary of Commerce under the presidents of Harding and Coolidge in the 20s, and he was also like pretty educated as well. He was a professional mining engineer, so that's why I think he's pretty qualified.
I would like to strongly disagree. Although he had a lot of experience, he wasn't in favor of the population, the people's vote, because Roosevelt was just a caring man and wanted to please the people. And he also talked about the New Deal program, and he also had discovered or started the program Social Security, which we still use today.
How can you say that Hoover wasn't a caring man if he had government-sponsored projects like the Hoover Dam? That thing is huge. That thing provides hydraulic power, right?
There's a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not done. He had tariffs like the Smoot-Hawley tariff, and he also increased the tax bracket on the highest, basically the richest people, from like 25% to like 63%. That way we could have a trickle-down effect and help the lower classes. So how is that not caring?
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So, what were each of your candidates' plans for addressing the Great Depression? Go ahead, Rachel.
Well, FDR's approach was the New Deal, and it consisted of the Federal Emergency Act, or the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, the Civil Works Administration, the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Indian Reorganization, the National Industrial Recovery Act, and the Public Works Association. So he had a lot of big points that he wanted to cover, and the outcomes were a majority of them were successful, because it also showed that he wanted to help a majority of people when he talked about the Indian reorganization, because this act ended the sale of the ownership of unallocated lands to Native American groups, so this was obviously a positive thing for the Native Americans.
So basically, FDR's plan was to get programs and more jobs for people to stimulate the economy and get more people working again. So what is Hoover's plan, Kevin?
Okay, so Hoover did focus on public work projects as well, like Hoover Dam, and then he taxed the highest earning percentage of our population, raising their tax bracket from about 25% to 60%. And then he also initiated the smooth Howley tariff. And then he really focused on local, like, trying to distribute money to the, locally, and he was even one of the presidents who donated his paychecks to charity, and he focused a lot on volunteerism, which was not by making the government initiate these plans like FDR did, but by letting just good citizens do it, so that that's why it was more localized.
So you're saying that although Hoover didn't have nearly as many programs, he had other things such as like tariffs, and he had the Hoover Dam and taxes to reorganize the flow of cash.
Yeah, he was definitely more intimate with the American people than FDR was, because FDR was more.
You said that Hoover dedicated or gave money to charity, but
His own paycheck.
his own paycheck,
Mhm.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's one person. We need, and we're in a Great Depression, so it's more.
Right.
And also, the laissez-faire, he was against that, and
Mhm.
so for economic use, we need that. Does that make sense? A little bit?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question. So Hoover was in office prior to 1932. Do you think that he benefited from the incumbency factor, Rachel?
Definitely not. He failed on a great amount of terms.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So Hoover was in office prior to 1932. Rachel, do you think he benefited from the incumbency factor?
He definitely did not. He didn't regulate Wall Street, and he didn't do as much as he possibly could for the people. And he was so bad that shanty towns were called Hoovervilles.
So basically he didn't do very much to help the people, and he led to this economic downturn.
Basically.
Okay. What's your views on this, Kevin?
I don't think he benefited as much as he could have, but I want to make one thing clear. He didn't cause the Great Depression. It just occurred when he was in term. So yeah, he didn't benefit because the American people saw him as the instigator of it. But if you look at it, he was really proactive in helping the American population. I mean, he was a really strong enforcer of prohibition. We all know what alcohol does to your system. He was really connected to his people. In the first 120 days of his presidency, he held press conferences and screenings on the daily. So I wouldn't say he failed, or I wouldn't make fun of him just because there were some towns called Hoovervilles. But he did his best, and it was just wrong place, wrong time.
So you're saying basically that it's not entirely his fault. He may have done some things to affect the economy, but overall, it just happened while he was there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next point. The electoral votes in 1932 were 472 in FDR's favor to only 59 for Hoover. So why was it such a landslide victory for FDR, Rachel?
It was such a landslide victory for FDR because he appealed to the popular vote through his New Deal approach and programs.
So basically, he was just very popular with the people, and considering how Hoover was seen as possibly leading up to the Great Depression, that's why it was such a skewed voting.
Indeed.
So, Kevin, why do you think that the electoral votes were so skewed in this election?
Okay, I think they were skewed because the only thing that FDR had was his popularity. If you really look at it, Hoover was a believer in individualism. He didn't want to force government regulation on the American population so that we could get our economy going. He wanted people to be able to do it themselves. That's why he liked volunteerism more. But as we all know, most Americans are stupid. So that's why they just like the people who have like, you know, the glam and who offer a new deal. So yeah, that's why it was so skewed and yeah.
So you're saying that it was like Hoover was misunderstood and that since FDR was better with the people, he had much more votes?
Yeah, very. Yeah.
Well, FDR created the CCC program, which was the Civilian Conservation Corps, and he wanted people to live independently and think for themselves. So this would help them gain knowledge.
Okay, so let's go ahead and conclude this here. So, are there any closing statements for why FDR would have been a better candidate in the 1932 election, Rachel?
Well, FDR was president for 4 terms, meaning that the people trusted him. So he was obviously the stronger president, and also he wasn't against the laissez-faire, which Hoover was, and that meant that the laissez-faire was the key to economic depression. So if you were against that, then how would there be any recovery?
Okay. Any closing statements, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that Hoover's conservative ideas would have worked eventually, but I understand that the American people were mad. But also, Hoover wasn't a bad president. He was just he was president at the wrong time, and so I understand that the American people they outed him because they believe that he caused the Great Depression, but he did a lot to help the people. I mean, Hoover Dam, the tariffs, increasing tax brackets on the higher incoming. He got the mobster Al Capone jailed by instructing the Justice Department and the Internal Revenue Service to work together. So, you know, he did a lot, but people just don't remember what the good things he did because of the Great Depression.
So that concludes Meet the Press. Thank you for watching.
Herbert Hoover was then better choice to be president. He had already served 4 years in office, 3 of which were in the Great Depression. Hoover was far more experienced to combat the country's economic woes compared to FDR. During his presidency, Hoover demonstrated enormous devotion to the American people. He began public works like the Hoover Dam, fought for prohibition, and distributed funds through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation.
As president, FDR promised to guide the nation from economic recession through his New Deal, which promised jobs, relief, and recovery.